Mo ngā tere ki runga Waimakarere te awa Tūāhuriri te tangata, Tuahiwi te marae, kei kai poi taku kai ngai nei, ko Joseph Hullen toku whenua. Literally translated, Mount Grey is the ancestral mountain that stands above. Waimakarere is the river that flows out into Pegasus Bay. Tūāhuriri is the ancestor after who my sub-tribe, my hapu, takes its name. Tuahiwi is the location of our ancestral home, our meeting place, and my name is Joseph Hullen. And I've had my opening line stolen by a com. I'm not a landscape architect. I'm not a PhD. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a go-to guy who knows a few things about a few things. And I'm a social disruptor. My mum's generation would use other terms, troublemaker, shit stirrer, those kinds of terms. You get the picture. In 2010 and 2011, Christchurch and Canterbury were rocked by a 7.1 and a 6.8 earthquake, as I'm sure most of you are well aware. The government's response was to establish CERA, the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, and Te Runanga and Ngāi Tūāhuriri were engaged in a treaty partner relationship as a iwi engagement. They devolved their responsibility to Ngāi Tūāhuriri, who hold mana whenua over the Christchurch area. Mana, authority, whenua, land. And that is because our people lived here and maintained authority over this place from the time we arrived until the time we signed Kemp's purchase. I won't go into the whole detail of the Ngāi Tūāhuriri claim and the process by which we became treaty partners. Suffice to say, we signed a contract which ended up selling 20 million acres of land to the Crown with the expectation that 10% of that land would be set aside for us, for places to live, schools, hospitals, burial grounds and cultivation sites. We ended up with about 10,000 acres. So the opportunity for intergenerational wealth was extinguished right then, right there. In 1998, we finally settled with the Crown for $170 million, some cultural redress and some bolt-ons, and some really cunningly negotiated bolt-ons that any organisation would be happy to have included in their portfolio. Right of first refusal, any Crown land in Christchurch in the South Island, surplus to the government's requirements, local council's requirements, offered to Ngāi Tūāhuriri as the first right of refusal for us to do something with or not. And the relativity clause mechanism. We settled for $170 million. The government of the day said we will settle all of New Zealand's iwi's claims for $1 billion. And so, what if you don't? So if you don't, for every dollar you go over $1 billion, we would like 17%, because 170 million is 17% of 1 billion. Good deals. Ngāi Tūāhuriri signed a memorandum of understanding and a heads of agreement with CERA. And so the Runanga then mandated a group named Matapōpiri to provide cultural advice to embed the Ngāi Tūāhuriri Ngāi Tahu narratives and values in the built form of the Christchurch rebuild. Cool. Te Papa o Tākaro and the Watermark project was the first that I worked on. And the key value that we identified was something we understand we call mahinga kai. Mahinga kai has been loosely interpreted by people as a place where you go to get food. Sounds like a garden, except nah. What it actually is a place where you go to, where you can get food, you can generate food, you can catch food, or harvest food. That's not a garden, that's the environment. Te Papa o Tākaro pre-European times, flowed past a pā called Puari that occupies the area situated where the old court buildings are now, perhaps as far down as Rehua Marae on Springfield Road, and over towards the Art Centre by Hagley Park. The reason it was located there, because right at the doorstep was the world's biggest pack and save. Our Lada, a river and interconnected wetlands and swamps that held an abundant amount of fish, waterfowl and bird species. Hands up if you've eaten a bird species that is not a chicken, a duck, a turkey, a quail, a spatchcock, or any other farmed bird. Name of the bird? TT, yep, cool. Hands up if you have eaten eel more than once a year. Okay, so quite representative of the population. Every year, my relations and I, there are a number of opportunities for us to eat for free. And they all depend on the health of the river, the waterways, the wetlands, and the lakes that we have access to. At the moment, we're in the middle or coming up to the end of the whitebait season. My partner and I, we head down to the river to catch a feed of whitebait. We have skin in the game. And so the importance of mahinga kai and the importance of the Te Papa o Tākaro project was that the waterway must be healthy enough that I can go down and eat out of that river. And so in our recommendations in the Te Papa o Tākaro project, the first thing we identified was stormwater, because that is the single largest pollutant of the river. And we also identified that architects inadvertently create some of the problems with those waterways. For instance, their use of copper as a fascia or as a roofing material. Copper reacts with rainwater, creates an oxide. It's a heavy metal. Every time it rains, that heavy metal oxide finds its way down into the river. Not great for aquatic life. Galvanised iron. Handrails, fences, the same thing. Every time it rains, toxic ooze carried down into the waterways, into the river, into the ecosystem. So stormwater. The Peter Tohori Centre on the side of the old Christchurch police station, Ngāi Tūāhuriri directed our property company, Ngāi Tahu Properties, that you will treat on-site all of your stormwater generated on-site. And we used it as an exemplar. And the reason we used it as an exemplar because we sit in on consent hearings and applications. And it's a case of talk the talk after we've walked the walk. So we treat in our buildings, our projects, we treat everything on site. We have the highest regard for the environment because of the mahinga kai values associated with it. If you build a city to attract humans, that is all you will attract. If you build a city to attract wildlife, indigenous biodiversity back into that area, humans will follow. The Te Papa o Tākaro is at the state now, so nice picture of the terraces there out the front of Anthony Goff's latest constructions, where most Saturdays, not every Saturday, my partner and I will head down and we'll feed the eels that are resident there. And because it becomes quite a big deal, 40 or 50 eels readily appear to the ground beef, the mince that I feed them, it also attracts a crowd. And so every time I go out to feed the eels at the terraces with my partner, she understands that I'm going to end up talking to people for about 20 minutes, advocating for the environment, for fresh water, and also for them to understand about why tuna, why eels are so important. The equivalent of the American Indian and their salmon. A once-in-a-lifetime migration, and then they die. Once they've bred, they've died, that's it. So everyone that's taken out, every one of those big females is taken out of the river is one less opportunity to improve the stocks. The second project I worked on was Tākaro Apoi. When I was a boy growing up in this town, there was nothing that outwardly reflected my whakapapa. Whakapapa, genealogy you might call it, literally translated, or a proper term, whakapapa is to place layer upon layer upon layer in its correct order. Our intention, our idea right from the very start was to impress upon our tamariki, our mokopuna, that this town, this city, you belong. And so in order to do that, we advocated and pushed for the inclusion of te reo, our kiwaha, our sayings, our proverbs, our songs, into Tākaro Apoi. The name itself, Tākaro, play, Apoi, swing. A play on Kai Apoi, the ancestral power of my people in the Ngāware and the Tairutu swamp. Sacked by Te Rauparaha, 1831. Kai, food, poi, swung into the centre and then swung out in trade. A prehistoric Dubai of the South Pacific. Tākaro, play, apoi. Children will come from all over Christchurch to play in this playground. And so to impress upon them that you belong, to be able to see the motifs, the emblems of your people, your language, embedded into the playground, normalise the use and the appearance of that language, normalise the fact that actually I belong in this city. When I was a boy growing up in this town, there was no Māori words, no kiwaha, no waiata anywhere. But I could go past any number of shops and see the language of the owners displaying their goods on their windows. I could see the whakapapa of my father and his family in the form of all of the statues and all of the notable people, even the names, but nothing to replicate me. Got quite confusing because as a boy this big, watching Bonanza on the weekends and then coming into town and seeing a totem pole and thinking, oh, I'm one of them. Actually, no, I'm not. So by normalising, embedding our language, we start to normalise it so from this generation, they feel they belong. They see they belong. The use of native species to provide the opportunities to bring those species, those bird species in that provide so much delight. Mahinga kai, place where food is generated. Kai is not just to feed the physical, it can feed the emotional and the spiritual. Nothing more rewarding than having your lunch, listening to the sound of a river gurgling by and the sound of bellbirds and tuis singing in the trees while you consume your lunch. Far more enjoyable than listening to the drum of jackhammers, the sound of traffic lights and horns as impatient drivers rush from place to place. And even with a degree of safety, by having within the playground low-growing species of shrubs so that line of sight for parents to see where their children are. So not only are they comfortable to come and play because it's an enjoyable place, they're comfortable to come and play because it's safe and because it's fun. Ngā whāraki manaki. Along the Avon River Precinct, along the Avon River Promenade, there are 13 of these mats, or these. Whāraki is a mat, manaki is to welcome, to assist, to embrace, to uplift the person with you, enhance their mana. And so the 13 of these whāraki manakis tell a story of part of the pōwhiri process, the process of welcome to guests. Starts up by the health precinct and eventually finishes down at Tākaro Apoi, and represents everything, including even our fallen soldiers, with a whāraki manaki maumahara out the front of the Bridge of Remembrance, with the dominant theme woven through the middle of it of the unmistakable sight of the Flanders Field poppy. Embedding our pepeha, fine to have it in Tākaro Poi, in the playground where our children see it, but not limited to there. Out in open spaces as well, in public realm, and stuff that actually records and acknowledges our history. And going back to Matapōpiri, the first thing we did was identify what we were going to work on. Initially, the 17 anchor projects. How do we approach that? Write a narrative for each of the projects. Get on with our mahi so that as each of these projects commence, we can be engaged at the start, at the ground floor, and influence the design. The one thing we didn't want to do was be seen as the reason why there was a cost overrun or a delay in the project. We had all our stuff sorted, all our ducks in the row and the grand narratives written, and then the next part of our work was to write an urban design guide. Why? Because we can write a narrative for each of the anchor projects, but then how does a landscape architecture interpret that and give effect to it in the built form? So we came out with a guideline for that as well. And then the next best thing is actually to engage with us, to meet with us face to face, develop a relationship so we can talk to you, you can ask questions of us and understand what it might look like, and then go away and tangent off as you realise what the possibilities might be. In all cases, we would go in with simple, clearly defined requirements, talk with the architects, talk with the landscape architects, and come out with an idea that we're going to get this. And at the next meeting, the accountants have had a look at it, shrunk down to here, and at the next meeting, the engineers have had a look at it, shrunk it down to here, and in some cases even with the change of government and a review of the tender, like the multi-sports facility for instance, and seeing a 75 million overrun, all of the embedded artworks and narratives from mana whenua, they didn't come near $75 million. But they were the first things to go because they look pretty and they're not functional. Well, actually they are. In Victoria Square there is a table, it's called the Kanakana table, and it's one of a number of pieces of street furniture scattered throughout the city as part of our underlying guideline, our mission statement, if you will, at the very start was kia atawhai ki te iwi, care for your people. So provide opportunities for them to sit and to eat and to congregate as a family group to picnic. Provide a location where they can engage with other people and talk and develop those enduring relationships that happen as you talk over food, over meals. Rather than, I've got a 1:30 with Joseph from Matapōpiri and he's got to be gone by 1:45 and that's my consultation box. Actually engage, sit down, look at each other in the eye, get to know each other and understand what the possibilities are. Oi Manua, the earthquake memorial. The greatest honour we could pay the families of those people who weren't from this city, who died in those earthquakes, is replicated in Oi Manua, where those people who died are acknowledged in their own language, so that their loved ones, when they come to visit, can see their loved one's name in the language that they understand and see that we cared enough about them. Kia atawhai ki te iwi. Te Omeka, the Justice and Emergency Services Precinct, probably the most challenging project on the Māori. Māori are overrepresented in all bad statistics: incarceration, diabetes, cancer, health, you name it, and underrepresented in all of the good stuff like tertiary degrees, PhDs, those kinds of things. But in our culture, we have a strong sense of justice. The korowai kākahu, or the kākahu kākapō that decorates the car park building attached to the Justice and Emergency Services precincts, represents a concept that we call tōpuni, where a high-ranking chief or rangatira takes off an item of his clothing and lays it down over a thing, a resource, a person, and that item comes under their protection and cannot be touched. By wrapping a kākahu kākapō around the car park building, our aim was that it would actually go over the southern wall of the whole building to show that we embrace law and order as well. Our concept of law and order is exactly the same. Within the building, there are functional elements. So even the tāne-ko pattern at the bottom of the stair riser serves a practical purpose, but it does it in a decorative style. And outside the building, there is a water feature. The water feature is intended so Māori, wherever we go, if we visit urupa or go to places where grief or tragedy have happened, we need water to cleanse ourselves spiritually and emotionally and to leave that hara, those bad things, behind. In the Justice and Emergency Services precinct, there are people that will go in there and they will hear information about their loved ones that they perhaps don't want to hear. In the Coronial Court, in the Supreme Court, or in the Children's Court. And so the opportunity, the flow of water from the inside of the building to the outside gives the opportunity, particularly for Māori who are overrepresented in the police and court statistics, the opportunity to wash and cleanse themselves before they go home, knowing full well that they perhaps have to return tomorrow. An opportunity to leave that hara there. Culturally appropriate. Tūranga, Central Library, tells the story about knowledge travelling from place to place. One of my relations asked me, Tūranga, why have we named our library Gisborne? Come on, cousin. And we went through the narrative, and so the artwork telling the story about Paikea. Hands up if you know about Paikea, the whale rider story. Exactly. He was the father of Tahu Pōtiki. Tahu Pōtiki is the eponymous ancestor of my tribe. He arrived in Tūranga, and so everything that we knew originated on the arrival there, the arrival and the travelling of knowledge. And so as Ngāi Tahu moved down the North Island and eventually into the South Island, our knowledge and our histories travelled with us. And so we depict them in our building, in the name and also the story about Paikea and Tūhura, the wall facing to the west. And once again, it's an easily identified Māori ko whaiwhai pattern that tamariki mokopuna look up, that's me. That's me. And inside, it tells one of our stories about the pursuit of knowledge in Tāwhaki, who went up through the heavens, various levels in search of his father and the bones of his father. And so even the design within the building grades from a colour at the bottom and the pūkeko, a bird that you would expect to see in the swamps living on the ground, and moves up kakapo and tui, titi. Te Ara Puha, the story of the stone, and Te Wao Nui o Tāne, or I Te Taonga. So once again, a play on the words. Te Wao Nui o Tāne is the great forest of Tāne. Te Wao Nui o Te Taonga, so bringing greenery back into the city, noble trees. Let's get trees back into this place. Attract those birds that are melodious and provide enjoyment to us and benefit your wairua. And these things, they provide amenity value to people with living, working, going to school within the city, a place to retreat to and relax, enjoy some food, enjoy some company, and clear open spaces, clean line of sight, lots of light, make you feel safe. And touchstones like pounamu, quite simple. So you go for a wander and you rub the pounamu, leave some of your oils behind, get into the habit of doing it every time you go into the city. Take your tamariki mokopuna with you. Create a habit that after you're long gone, they keep going back because it connects them to you. Hinipaka. Hinipaka was a navigation aid to my people pre-European times. The bus exchange is all about navigation. From the features built inside, so the kapehu, the compass point at the entrance, what points to all of the important areas for my tribe. The narratives within inside, and even karakia at each of the entries and exits. We say karakia at the start of everything, a journey, food, meetings, funerals, gatherings, you name it. And also depicting the ancestors in the area and the associations. If I have one challenge for you as landscape architects, push the boat out. Push the boat out as far as you can after you've consulted with iwi. The stuff that we can provide you provides value or adds value to the things that you are building, that you are designing. And then aside from that, the visitors that come to Christchurch see this stuff and they gravitate towards it. And it creates engagement and breaks down the barriers between us and them, you and me. Break down those barriers. We're all in the same boat. Colour of our skins might be a little bit different, but we are all in the same boat. Care for our environment, care for our people, ki ata whai ki te iwi. Kia ora.